All right. Well, welcome. Today is November 19th. It's 3 o'clock, and this is the meeting of the City of Topeka Policy and Finance Committee. I'm the chair, Karen Hiller, City Council District 1.
Jeff Cohen, District 8.
Tony Emerson, District 4.
All right, thank you. We've got city manager here, staff support from Human Relations and Legal, Councilman Padilla, and some department heads and finance. Thank you so much for coming. And of course, our loyal council staff, not to forget. So I'll call the meeting to order. Our next item of business is to approve the minutes of April 27th, which was our last meeting. We worked through the spring and then waited till fall.
I'll move.
Been moved?
Second.
And seconded to approve the April 27, 2018 minutes. Further discussion? Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Carried. All right, the primary reason for our meeting is to discuss the requirement that is in our City of Topeka personnel policies for employee residency. I don't know if...
Can we start with some background on maybe why we have a residency requirement, Chair?
We sure can. I thought maybe the thing to do was to start with what it is.
Okay.
City manager, do you want to read it off and talk about why?
Sure.
Okay.
We have a number of things that cover residency requirement, and obviously, the first one is our personnel code that establishes the requirement relative to residency requirements 6 months after move to Shawnee County within 6 months after completion of initial employment probation. And then there is another provision that allows to grant one extension up to 6 months. We also have different references to that in our various public bargaining contracts. They all typically reflect. There might be, Catherine could cover any specific things that are really noteworthy, but they all pretty much mirror that, except for, like, for example, in the Fraternal Order of Police contract, it does state that they'll live within 30 minutes reporting time during the duration of their employment. And and the same is true of the firefighters contract. And then our water contract has a 45-minute period of time for reporting to work. And so those are kind of the basics of the project and are the guidelines that we have within our policies. And so we've got, and those have been established, I think the last change was 2013, is that accurate, Catherine?
I want to say 11, where department directors.
I want to credit the council staff for help. Just a brief calendar is the city, of course, was founded back in the mid-1850s. Without doing a lot of deep research, we're pretty sure that the requirement was that all employees live in the city most of that time. The personnel code that we have in front of us was created in 1981. At that time, it required that everyone live in the city limits. And I have authenticated that somewhat informally on the street by checking with Chief Cochran, who was hired in 1987 and reports that all city employees had to live in the city limits at that time. We have not found the records for when it changed, but Detective Wheels said he was employed in 1994, and by that time it had been changed to Shawnee County, except for department heads. And department heads had to live in the city, and so if somebody was on the line and got promoted, they needed to move into the city if they didn't already live there. In 2008, there was an attempt to change that. That failed. We have the minutes for that if we decide we want to get deeper into it, the resolution in the minutes. And then in 2011, the ordinance was, there was a proposal and the change to allow department heads to live out in Shawnee County, as well as the 30-minute response time for public safety was changed in 2011. So, just the Cliff's Notes the history. We do have the proposal and the minutes from both 2008 and 2011, so that if this body decides they want to go further, I really appreciate Liz helping get those, but I don't want us to reinvent the pros and cons, and I do want us to be fresh on why people considered them in the past. Thank you, City Manager. We'll come back to you. It was Councilman Cullen that wanted us to bring this forward, so I thought before we spent too much time on it, we should let you
Sure.
explain why.
Thank you, Chairman. I've been here 3 years, and you just kind of hear buzzings as you attend things on, it's difficult. It's difficult everywhere finding good people. And, I think I just said, why couldn't we, or why do we limit ourselves to the pool of talent that's here instead of outside of Shawnee County? We've got road engineers and things like that could come over from the Kansas City area. We could draw them this direction. But the thing is they don't necessarily want to live here, and that's kind of unfortunate. But we're still not allowing a chance to even get at that type of talent. So, as I run into other people, they said that the emergency services sometimes are hard to get a recruiting class together. And just looking out, we have several smaller communities that are fairly close that probably have good talent that we'd like to be able to draw from. And it would just seem to make sense that we would consider that. I think that's it. And they were mentioning earlier that police has a requirement of 30 minutes and the firefighters 30 minutes and water is 45 minutes. But this summer I went and I ran for a county commissioner, and driving those county roads, really, it could probably take you longer than 30 minutes to get back to Topeka if you lived far enough into the county. So it was kind of one of those things that, it made me think, while I was driving, putting up a couple of signs, they were 35 miles apart, and thinking that, one was up north and one is south, but still, the distance was great. I didn't realize that we did have some contracts that did require some of those things. If we did decide to make some decision to proceed on this, is it going to affect any of the contracts that we have in place right now?
I can give you the short answer is that there is a method that allows us to work through that with the unions, and I can let Catherine or Jackie explain in more detail how that process works. But there is a mechanism that's built into each of the contracts to address that. So if you'd like them to explain it, they sure could.
Well, and one other point, some of the contracts have like an automatic reopener. If the personnel code changes, then we want to review what the personnel code has done. The other is to simply ask the unions if there would be a change to eliminate the residency requirement. We could reach out and say, would you like to, would both sides agree to reopen the contract? And then we would meet and confer just like we do for an entire open contract.
Mm-hmm. That's all I had.
Okay. Well, thank you. So it sounds like the fundamental, just so we make sure we're working from a problem point of view rather than a solution point of view, the reason you brought this forward was because of an issue of attracting and keeping quality personnel up and down the line, it sounds like.
Yep.
Rather than a residency issue per se, but how do we solve this other problem?
Well, yeah, and I think I said, why aren't we hiring people from, Meriden or Osage City? And they said, well, we can't because they need to be a Shawnee County resident. And I think that's where I started saying, why? Why do we have this? And that's why we're here.
Okay, thank you. So just to take another step with what you said about Osage City and Meriden, and I'm not taking a position on this issue at this point. I voted against it last time I noticed. So is seeing ourselves rather than just a city as a central part of a more metropolitan area that draws. rural metropolitan. Back to city manager.
Yes.
Could you visit a little bit about your thoughts on this issue, issues from, pros and cons are fine, issues from staff point of view?
Right, from my position and from also from the directors, we look at trying to hire the best people that we can, and it's occurred a number of times that we've had individuals that we would be interested in hiring, but they're not interested in moving. Excuse me. And so that's put a damper on our ability to hire certain individuals. We have some positions that means they've been left open for a period of time because we can't get someone that would fit the bill that would move to the community. We have a couple of positions like that. We know that recently we had an individual that was a potential person that could have worked in our court that even came to the city council and said, look, I couldn't move here. I didn't want to move here, but I would have been perfect for this job. So, excuse me, back in that cold.
It seems
So, thank you. So from our standpoint, mine specifically and some of the others, it is a definite concern for us that we be allowed to consider individuals that are not Shawnee County residents. This issue in deciding where we're at right now is also important from the standpoint of that we have individuals that we provided notice to currently that are not Shawnee County residents and therefore don't meet the requirement of the code. And since this was brought up to be considered by the committee, we've not moved forward with addressing that with some of these individuals. And so for me, I didn't want to force that issue if indeed there was going to be a potential for a policy change that would potentially cause them to either resign or end up us having to go through a difficult procedure relative to termination. So my desire was to hopefully get this before the committee, determine if you were going to take it up. If you were, then move forward with whatever consideration and eventually move it through the process. So for me, that was a critical part as well, is to make sure that a decision is made one way or another. If the decision of the committee is not to address it, to leave it as is, then we'll do what we're responsible to do relative to the individuals that are not, give them notice again in a period of time to rectify their situation. And so that's important for me because I have individuals that have been hired in the last year that have complied. They've moved to Shawnee County at cost to them and in order to comply with the law, the rules as they are, and I feel it only fair that we make all follow the rules as they are intended to be followed. And so need to know how to proceed in order to make sure that it's fair to all concerned.
Well, thank you for that. I think just across the board, yes. Not only does our committee expire at the end of January, but if we can make a decision today as far as whether we want to proceed at all, and if so, get a pretty fast sequence that would give the proper opportunity for the public and the employees to let us know their thoughts, pros and cons, but also get it moved forward so that it's understandable that city manager's been kind of holding some at this point. City manager, if I can ask you a little bit differently on this question, since the issue is fundamentally because we're needing to hire good people. We've been really focusing on diversity and inclusion in a variety of ways here in the city, and we got some really interesting input. At least I thought it was really good, of some strategies that people are working on in Chattanooga as well when we were on the inner city trip. And could you address a little bit whether we are going about our hiring practices the same way that we always have, or whether we're doing some things differently? And in particular, regarding the opportunity to, if there were a focus on hiring minorities and I mean that in a very broad sense, all sorts of categories, in order to diversify our workforce so that our workforce looks like our community.
Right.
If there were a different approach to hiring and really eagerly filling those spots, one of the things we know about minorities choosing to come here, or to any city, not just here, is wanting to be sure that the workforce is diverse and that there are people like them, or that reflect that same diversity when they get here, in terms of wanting to live here, in terms of wanting to get there, to take the job. Are we making changes in how we are working to hire?
Well, I know that the police department has. They've made some very specific changes to the process, reaching out to specific locations where minorities attend college, a greater number, different parts of the country that would look at us as being a great opportunity for a job and opportunity to go through an academy and be part of our community. I think that there are a number of other steps that Jackie could talk to relative to how we've been doing hiring. We reach out pretty broad, and it's pretty high effort that we make in order to be able to get individuals of all races or interests to come here.
The police department's having some success.
Yeah,
Is that right?
they have. Yes, they clearly have.
Thought so.
And I think, too, we had, the fire department recently had their first woman in quite a while pass through the academy to join the force. So I think we're doing good things in that area, but it definitely requires a diligence in order to make sure that we are trying to broaden our diverse workforce.
And I ask that just because sometimes if you're going about things the same way, you have the same problem. And if solutions to filling our workforce can be to, one of the other goals we've had is to attract more minorities. And so to match that, changing the recruiting techniques as another alternative to solve the problem, just wanted to make sure that we weren't just talking about the residency issue, but that we made sure we were looking at solving the problem. Another solution to solving the problem that we've identified as a community along the way, particularly in the last 10 years, let's say, is to make Topeka to work on quality of place and have it be a place that is more attractive to people to move to or to stay. So,
well, I think, that's one of the things that I see too, is we're making strides in that area. And as we do that, typically a lot of times what happens when this situation related to not living within Shawnee County comes into play is if you have a spouse that needs to go east to work and a spouse that needs to go west if they want to work in Topeka, and trying to find that middle ground location where they can work and where they be able to go in each of the directions that they have for a commute. And I really feel like that is where we can gain some ground with this type of a policy. Jackie, you want to add anything relative to the recruitment efforts that we're doing?
There are some efforts, I would say, recently we've done some recruitment at the Haskell University in Lawrence, and what I would have added is what Mr. Trout just touched upon, that the dual working family and having a central point where some could go west to Topeka and some to go east into Kansas City area is what we run into most often. And they like to try to keep their, especially if they have children, being able to keep the children stable and being more flexible in their commute, but keeping their family located in one location is important to candidates.
if I can follow up with that, when I read the minutes trying to prepare for this meeting, apparently in the 2008 to 2011 time period, I think the 2008 proposal included having to have a council-approved exception granted if someone were not going to meet the criteria. That didn't pass, but by 2011, the reference was made that there had been 2 employees that had been exempted by council action. So it maybe became culture there for a while. I'll throw that out to City Manager Jackie for any history, Councilman Cohen as well, the issue of leaving it as it is, but providing allowing for exceptions for the dual workers come up?
I think the exceptions that were made were when the requirement was that the department directors had to reside within the city limits, and internal promotions had occurred where the employees as non-department directors met the residency requirement, but then they were promoted to department directors, and so the council made exceptions that they did not have to move into the city, but they already met the Shawnee County residency requirement. So I think that there was 2 exceptions of that nature that I'm aware of.
I think we made one for the community development department. I mean, I wasn't on the council, but so that he could move out in the county and have his dogs, have his
Might have-
hunting dogs.
Maybe before my time,
Maybe.
I'm not aware of that one. Yeah.
Al Bailey. I think we did, or they. Okay, just checking. Had that come up in your thought pattern, or was it, yours was broader?
No, and,
Okay.
and mine is really mostly just to get the best quality person for that position, whatever that position is.
Okay, thank you. Councilman? Yes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess a follow-up question would be, how often does this happen? I mean, is this something that happens, there's 1 or 2 positions a year, or is this something that happens on a weekly basis that this is a problem? Because right now, at least, I have a lot of respect for Mr. Cohen, and I appreciate him bringing this up. But, initially, I'm reluctant to change this, but I'm open to be educated that it's something that's, coming up on a weekly basis or something, or...
We're running into it more frequently. I would say in the last year, we've probably had 3, so it's not a real systemic problem, but it is coming up more frequently. Another example that happened about 2 years ago that I would mention is we had a candidate that their husband was enlisted at Fort Riley, and so they understood there was a residency requirement, but they inquired as to whether or not there was a waiver for military personnel or spouses of military. So I think that that's another consideration with the close proximity. 70 miles is not an unreasonable commute for some. And so we do have a pretty large military installation that's close by that could be another pool of spouses that we're missing out on as a result of that, and that did happen in that case. So this year I'm aware of 3 issues where one of the things, our application system, if you start an application and you don't finish it, it will send you an automatic email saying you started but you didn't finish. So recently we received a response back that the candidate said, I seen in the application that there was a residency requirement and I'm not able to move to Shawnee County, so that's why I did not finish my application. So we are seeing it more frequently than we have maybe in the most recent past.
But are you saying, including those, there's only been 3?
There's about 3 this year.
Including the ones that said they didn't follow through with
Yes,
applying?
and some, we just don't know if they just don't take the time to tell us why they didn't complete their application.
Sure. Out of how many? 3 out of...
Oh, we have thousands of applications. It's a small percentage, but it is still an impact. And you see it more with the specialized positions. We have some engineer positions that have remained vacant for up to 1.5, almost 2 years, and we still have a few vacancies that are holding over a year. So the more specialized positions are more challenging to fill. And there's a much smaller applicant base for if you use engineers or IT positions as example, because it's a more specialized training and career field. So we're already dealing with a small applicant pool to start with, and some of them just don't have the desire to relocate their families.
And I'm sorry if I may
No,
follow up
please.
with that. I guess what I'm thinking, I know a lot of guys, a lot of engineers that I work with, and a lot of them live in Shawnee County or even Topeka. The head of Bartlett West lives in the city of Topeka. So is it a matter of for what we pay, it's hard to get people to relocate here?
We
in some of those
have
fields?
increased the pay substantially over the last few years. We have, we did a compensation study, and for engineers, as an example, we do pay 5% above the market rate for governmental engineering positions to try to attract, and we still have vacant. Our stormwater engineer, for example, has been vacant for over 1.5 years. So we still have a challenge. One of the finalists for one of our engineer positions was in Oklahoma, and they did not want to leave their home base, but they could have traveled very frequently and did not accept the position because of the residency requirement at the end of the probationary period. So more frequently we see that they are from the Kansas City area for the engineering and IT positions.
Thank you.
I have a question. Does anybody know, did they just create some of these to, force people to live here and be a part of the community?
Well, if you read the information, that typically that's part of the reason that residency requirements are created, is they have a desire to make sure that individuals locate within the community and that they're part of the community, and they feel like there's an opportunity to make sure that they become immersed in the community rather than just coming here to work and then leaving, and that it becomes they have more value, they value the community more by living in it as well as working.
And I have also heard, and they're going to pay the taxes and appreciate a little more what we're doing with budget and pay and things like that.
I'd also think that almost all of them would fill their car up with gas before they left town, or swing by Dillon's or Sam's Club on their way out of town with the groceries of the evening. I mean, they're going to leave their money. They're going to leave money in our community, even if they're going to go live in St. Mary's. Not too far away.
Correct.
Councilman Padilla, I appreciate you have come. You want to share some thoughts on this?
Thank you. This is something I've thought about for a long time as an employee of the city of Topeka. Because when I started, you had to be living in the city limits in order to work for the city of Topeka, and then it was expanded to Shawnee County. I thought that was a reasonable expansion because it still kept the employment pool, as I thought, like Mr. Trout said, engaged with the community. And I think that's an extremely important fact that we have to recognize. We compliment the police department on what they've been doing, and they deserve the compliments. And the result of that is that there is better relationships between the citizens of Topeka and the police department. They know them by first name. They recognize them. They almost become possessive of some of their community police officers because they know who they are. That wouldn't happen if that community police officer was living in Natchitoches or Leavenworth or Lawrence. It just doesn't happen. So that availability to the community that they serve is what I am focused on. And I appreciate and support the efforts to attract people to our community, but that's it, to attract it to our community so that we enrich it, not so that they can come in and then leave at their convenience. And it also gives me pause, though, because I don't know that we're looking deep enough or in the right way at the candidates that we do have to say to others that we don't have the talent already here in Topeka. And that does kind of grind me the wrong way because from personal experience, I have family members who have lived and grown up here. They went to college, they graduated, and they've come back to Topeka for a reason, because they like Topeka. They want to stay here. They struggle to find employment in Topeka because we keep looking at drawing people from somewhere else and not the people who live here. And I think that's short-sighted, but I know that employment pools come and go, ebb and flow. And right now, talking about emergency services like the police department, I don't think it's because it's Topeka. I don't think it's because of the money we pay. I think it's because it's a tough job. And it's hard to get anybody to take that job. I don't care where you're living. So I just want to make sure that we're doing the right thing for the people who have decided to come here, be a part of our community on a full-time basis, and encourage others to take part of that journey that we're trying to give to everyone. And I don't think it's that difficult. Now, I may be wrong. I remember being a recruiter for the police department, and I remember being able to talk about my town and talk about my department in a way that made people want to come here. And I think that's something that we are still working on as a city, as a governing body. And I think that's one of the things that maybe needs a little more polishing. I'm not saying we're doing anything wrong. I'm just saying that I think maybe the way we look at ourselves as an attraction to others is something that we really need to give some thought to. And I appreciate the committee taking up the time and the topic to talk about this. And I guess the other thing that kind of sits sideways for me is that when I sign a piece of paper and say and tell people that I'm going to be an employee of the city of Topeka, and I agree to abide by the rules and of being an employee, that I stick with that, that I don't in some way circumvent that or deceive to the degree that I'm not living in Topeka, even though I signed a contract with my employer to do that. And that's the one thing that I'm a little concerned about as well. Thank you.
I have a question. HR, is there any idea how many employees currently live outside of the county? Just rough idea.
There's about, I think that there's between 10 and 15 that are outside of the residency requirement. You have 6 months after the completion of your probation, so really 1 year from hire to meet that. So we monitor the completion of probation and then when and if they come into residency and track that.
I have another question.
Go ahead.
Do we have a department director living outside of the city or outside of the county?
Not that the department director that I'm aware of was one of the exceptions that I referred to earlier.
Okay. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, well, we've heard some pros and cons. I think they're both compelling. Again, if we were going to spend more time on it, I think we need to have noticed up and have invited the public. And I think that this, if there are any of you that wanted to speak, my understanding is you were invited just to kind of sit in and see what we were talking about. So is there anybody who wants to speak from the staff before we proceed? Jason?
Yeah, I just want to say a couple words about the residency requirement, and I definitely support Councilmember Padilla's points about being invested in the community. I think that's really important. I think residency is a requirement. Times have changed when you think about people participating in Lions Club, Rotary. You know, that's when these things kind of came about, is there was that kind of tool, and I think people live differently today. And I don't, I just want to make sure, as you guys talk about it, it's not a knock on Topeka. I don't think people don't want to live here. I think the reality is people have a family, as we said, a dual career couple. They don't want to disrupt their kids starting a new school district. They're trying to prioritize what's important for their family. And I just think that's a lot of decision that goes in. And I think that the other piece, it's hard for us to know who isn't applying, because I think just in our professional associations, people know that there's a residency requirement for engineers. So we're very fortunate that KDOT is in the situation that they are, and we've been able to hire a number of good KDOT local Topeka staff, and I'm very glad that they're excited to work for the city. But if KDOT was fully funded and things were going well there, I think we'd be struggling even more for those engineering positions because it's a competitive market. I mean, I talked to Bartlett West And I think they have the same issue about trying to recruit engineers to work into Topeka because, are they going to uproot a family and move here just for one job if they have kind of a dual career couple? You think a 45-mile commute is nothing? I mean, for most people, and so you put that as a 90-mile kind of distance. I mean, that's what we're dealing with building a pool. So just, I'm happy I live in Topeka, I'm invested in the community, but I think it's important that as we look at staff that becomes a barrier, I think, to recruiting. We talked a little bit about it. Is it a way that you flip it as an incentive? If you want people to live in the community, what is the incentive that we provide? Because this is a behavior kind of change, and I think just it's a $500 vote. I mean, some kind of requirement like that incentivizes people to be here. Otherwise, I see it as a barrier that they don't even apply.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I think for the police department, I think Councilman Padilla kind of hit it on the head. Community is community, and the police department is part of that community. I think if I would make a suggestion on the residency is maybe lengthening that time in which you have to move into the county. Because like Dr. Peake said, people have families, and sometimes school kids, maybe the youngest one's in junior high school, and if they had a little bit more time, they could let that last one graduate, and then maybe they move to Topeka. So I'd like to see maybe an expansion of the time of you have to move to Topeka. I do think that most people, when they take a job, they move here from someplace else. They're not familiar with the area. I think there's that acclimation time to where they really want to see if this is where I want to be. And maybe sometimes uprooting the whole family within that short amount of time, because realistically, when you talk about a year, it's a long time, but it's not a long time when you put some of those things in perspective. And I think Dr. Peake also hit another thing on the head was that I think we live in a different society nowadays, in which aspect that people, community and stuff like that is not a big issue for them. And so I think those are the things we deal with. But I think if anything, I would like to see the time maybe expanded in which you have to move to the county.
Chief, if I could draw you out, because you all are raising some good points. Each time we talk about more time or the reasons, it has to do with people with families. And I know that a lot of the recruiting is targeted to young single people. And maybe without naming anything, but the name of this neighboring city can start with an L. People don't want somebody who wants to live in Kansas City or Lawrence or whatever, and doesn't want to live here when they could move in and be part of this community. And then there's a related element of learning the community because you're there, you're shopping, and you're whatever you do after hours, or when you're not working, you're in that community and you're in that community and you become part of it and own it and know people and you have your network. So is there a difference in thought between young single recruits and people who have, at any age, who have families?
Well, I think there is, but I think what we need to keep in mind is Topeka, we got a lot of great things going on. We got the Wheatfield project that's going in, and that's something that young people said that they want. So I think that's going to be a recruiting tool. We got the revitalization and Topeka going on. So we're getting a lot of things like that that are drawing that younger crowd. And so I think we're doing a lot of good things. But if you look at the Wheatfield project, I don't know, I'm not an engineer or a construction guy, but that looks like a good 2-year project that we're just kind of breaking ground. So I think we'll have those things in the future. That's why I think also, when we have adopted a holistic recruiting plan for us, and that includes using Forge here in Topeka. And so when we go out to other areas to recruit, we recruit the whole family and not just the potential police applicant. That way, when they come here, they both have a job when they hit ground in Topeka. And I think that's a very positive thing. So I think we need to be innovative when we recruit and go out and look for employees as a whole for the whole city of Topeka, to those potential recruits. But utilizing those agencies and those groups and organizations like that is starting to pay benefits for us. We're really starting to see those things start to come to fruition. We've worked really hard with HR and come up with a process that we can take on the road, and so we can do a lot of recruiting. We're not losing focus on the sites of the city of Topeka, but right now within the city of Topeka and Shawnee County, we can't meet our needs, our number of employees that we need. And so we have to look outside. So when we look outside, we look at the whole families and not just the individual recruits.
So, and if you don't have an answer to this question, that's fine. What would your net recommendation be on this issue then? Leave it alone, we're doing pretty good, ramping up our game, or go ahead and open it up, times have changed?
Well, I think initially the thing we could look at is expanding that time that requires somebody to move here.
Okay.
Because if we look at that, we're going to start putting ourselves out in front of some of those projects that are underway right now, like the Leafield project. That was one, if you remember, city council, the young people came and said, we want something like this, we need something like this. And the city council and everybody responded properly and said, yeah, and granted that, which I think was a great move. That's where we're headed. There's a lot of vision in Topeka. There's a lot of things that are going on, and we have a lot of great things going on in the city of Topeka and Shawnee County. So to me, I just think if we expand that residency time, to move into the city and county, we're going to get out time-wise into some of those projects being completed. And again, we look at recruiting the holes.
Yeah, we'll probably have, well, I hope it's 100 on deck for downtown, but again, we're leading with the retail and entertainment, so those are trading.
I have a question.
Yes,
Chief.
please.
So what would be a time period that you're thinking of, like 2 years or 3 years
Well,
after your probation? Is that
I don't know if that requires a little more studying, but if you go too far, maybe you get too far out, and you don't serve your purpose, But I think 2 years would be a good max, maybe 18 months. Again, if you think about it, if you have a senior in high school and you take a job in August, because I think we've had some people say, we would move here after our kid graduates because they're going to be on the way to college and we wouldn't have to worry about that aspect of it. And if they're a junior, if you have a 2-year frame, that would allow those things to get completed. And when we talk about military installations, we do a lot of recruiting in Fort Riley. And some of that is, both of them are in the military. One of them is ETS, and the other one has another 12 to 18 months, and they can't leave. So we lose that potential recruit, but if we expanded that, we might pick up 2 recruits and aspect that both of them.
Since you're still there, let me throw out another angle on that. After the baton if you want. There's a difference in the jobs that people have. I mean, if a clerk is coming and working in the back office in finance and just crunching numbers, one would hope that that clerk would get along with their fellow employees, but they're not. They're doing a limited amount of direct customer service, and they're not out, and that's not their full-time job. Others, be it police, fire, Sasha's neighborhood relations folks that are out in code all the time, they have much more interaction. People that are answering the phone in the mayor's office or the clerk's office or the HR folks who need to know the community. Is there a differential in a job classification that might make a difference, whether it matters?
Well, I think the difficulty for this body is making that determination, because there are positions, like Dr. Peake pointed out, and HR said have been open for 2 years. So that's the difficulty. Can you single individual jobs out and not the whole? And I think that's a difficult task. But the interesting thing is, if you go out to Stormont Bell and you ask how many of their doctors live here in Topeka and Shawnee County, you're going to be surprised if you can count that on one hand. They live in Kansas City, they live in Lawrence, they live where there's a lot of stuff going on, And so,
Chief of Staff, downtown, law department.
that's right. The things that we're trying to get to, the things we're working on getting there. So very optimistic about those things. But I think the difficulty that everybody has is, can we single out certain jobs specific that say they can live somewhere else or whatever? I don't think, personally, in my position, I don't think we can do that, where you could identify certain jobs and say, you're exempt from it, you're exempt from it, you're not, just because you do this and I do that.
Well, we traditionally, and not to touch on yet another squishy area, but done that with immigration in this country for years. You know, the rules, but if we've got a special need, then we can do waivers to make sure we fill that need. So it's not impossible in terms of...
It's America, anything's possible.
Well, there you go.
Well, and from my position, I would want to have the policy be uniform across the city. I think that it's their best bet. I think that when we go start looking at picking and choosing policies, then we begin to have an issue as to who we make that policy for. It makes it very difficult on HR and others in order to be able to implement and manage something like that. It would be better if we have one policy.
Got a question?
I have a question for the city manager. Sorry, Chief. Did you have a residency requirement in Iowa where you were?
We did. There was a residency requirement for certain, and it was really only the law enforcement folks that had a residency requirement. No other employees had a residency requirement. So we had, it's 30 minutes here, it was 10 miles there. That was that was the residency requirements typically. It's different related to city managers. Those are all negotiated as to whether, that's always been a negotiated item with city managers.
Chief?
Good afternoon. I just want to say a few things about this. Obviously, I'm from out of town. I came here and I abided by what was set upon me when I was hired. And I love it. I really do. I've been in Kansas City. They did have a residency requirement, KCK. They had to live in the county. But that county's a little bit bigger, so, and the highways were a lot more accessible to get people to work on time. I mean, I live 27 miles away, and it took me 12 minutes to get to work on the highway. At one point in time, my wife worked in Kansas City, Missouri, and they had an earnings tax that they subjected people that didn't live in the community. It was a 1% earnings tax that went towards all the services within that community that they were not basically paying upon. And just like here, this is the state capital. There's a lot of state and federal buildings that are not paying property taxes, so I know I'm going to get help with that, but I just had to say it. So we're in a bind here, with getting, I'm not going to say, just people that want to come here, live, and do a good job. They're good people. Like Chief Cochran said, they've had rough times hiring the scene of the fire department. We have a very small pool of people that apply, and it's making no excuses. It's the fact they need certifications even to apply, whereas the police train them on site. So they can use the basic education and train them on site. And to ask Councilwoman Hiller's question, yes, I have been in conversation with Ms. Russell as to ways to better increase our minority hirees. And just like anything else, it's probably going to have a cost factor to it for the city department to try to homegrown young minority individuals. So we're trying to keep up with the police department with their programs. It's been going pretty good so far. We did have the first female in 17 years. Did hard. We had the first Spanish-speaking male. And I don't even remember the last time they hired one. So I mean, we're trying, but our numbers aren't that great. And I feel that we were able, in some shape or form, like Chief Cochran said, a transition time for people to move. We've had people from Lawrence apply here and get offered the job and then back out because their wife didn't want to move. They had kids in school, like was told here. They just are not ready to move at that time, but it would have been a great move for their career. So whatever you decide, I mean, we're going to abide by it and live by it. So we'll just keep pushing ahead and try to get the recruits that this city needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to follow up on what the chief said. I served for a while on the Civil Service Commission before coming on this governing body, and I had the opportunity to listen to the candidates for both fire and police. Most, it seemed like, of the police department applicants seemed to come from a fairly regional area around Topeka. There were some at some distance, but mostly a regional area. Fire department, I was impressed upon, but what impressed me was that we had people from Colorado and I'm trying to think, Nebraska. It just stood out, California. It stood out to me that these young people had gone online. They had checked out Topeka. They had checked out the department. They decided they wanted to come here and work for the Topeka Fire Department. And some of them were single. Some of them were with family. But when you asked them what kind of commitment they would make to the city, they said 100%. We want to come here to Topeka. We've looked at it. And again, I think that's what we have to be a marketable location. When people search for a home on Zillow or anything else, we have to present ourselves at the highest level we can. And understand that we are the attraction, the city, and the jobs are the attraction. And I agree, I think some thought should be considered with regards to the extension or expansion of that time to transition in. I think that's a good thought. Something that was mentioned real quickly was a stipend for somebody who is of a specialized field or something. That might be another good thought, too. The city has to attract. We just cannot keep going further out, and assuming that by doing that, in my opinion, that we'll get more candidates or better qualified candidates. We've got plenty of colleges and a local college here that turns out a lot of graduates that can meet a lot of the needs that we have for our city. And looking too far beyond without giving them some consideration, I think is shortchanging ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. If I can clarify what you said, because we've come up with this little cash amount a couple of times. And in one case, I think that the 500, I think was mentioned, had to do with maybe a bonus or whatever for choosing to live here, for living in the city. Maybe if that's how I understood it. If we didn't have a residency requirement, you got a bump, you got some sort of cash stipend, if you bonus, whatever, if you moved here. Yours was a bonus to attract in someone that was in a specialty area, so it would be, do I understand that correctly?
Not exactly.
Okay.
The previous one, the one where if you weren't in the county, that you got the opportunity to come here, you could get a bump for that, but not necessarily for any particular type of skill or profession.
Okay.
But you could expand it depending on what the governing body decides to do. And what they
Just wanted to make sure I knew what you meant.
No.
Because it sounded like it was for specialties, and
Not only, no.
No, okay, for residency. Okay. Okay, so we've talked about some different reasons why to solve the problem of how do we get people here. And we talked about some pros and cons of choosing a change in the residency and a couple of different options. Again, our goal today would be to decide whether we want to proceed further. If so, does I as chair feel like we need to open it up more publicly for input so that we make sure we get that? So I would entertain at this point some conversation about whether you want to proceed and perhaps some ideas or specifics about how.
Madam Chair, if I may, I would not be in favor of just doing a wholesale change to this policy. However, maybe an iterative approach, like a couple, well, I guess it was the two chiefs mentioned about maybe I guess I'd be willing to explore maybe lengthening the time, maybe 18 months or something, from I guess right now, total it's a year, so maybe add another, year onto that or something. And that'd be a way, I guess, of seeing if it had a measurable impact on what we're doing. Because the other thing I think we need to be aware of is, in some ways, this is also unfair to people that moved here and complied. That now we're changing the rules. They made the investment to come here, and now we're changing the rules midstream on them. So that's. I guess that would be my approach or my wish.
To explore just that?
Initially, yes.
Okay.
And again, obviously, if we get more public input, and right now we don't have a lot of data. I mean, we just have kind of some snippets here and there, but
No, we don't, because I wanted to make sure for one thing.
Yeah, and obviously, I think in the end, what does the data show? What is what are other cities' experience with this? I'd really like to know that. Plus, frankly, I need to know what my constituents think about it.
Okay.
But initially, that's something I consider.
So, at a minimum, go forward with something that people can react to. And your suggestion would be to explore the lengthening of the time. Yours, at first anyway, was to explore just opening it up to countywide. Or I mean,
Outside the
to
county.
no limits, I'm sorry, outside county, no limits, basically.
Yep.
Any further thoughts on how we should
I think
proceed?
it's been a good conversation. Well, I'd at least like to have another meeting and maybe invite the public to come and speak. And before we decide, we're going to proceed only this direction, I think we ought to at least let them talk about what we've already talked about here today.
Okay. Maybe just put together those two options, or, I mean, we have a few others that came up through the meeting. Just, how do you think?
Sure.
Yeah.
Both those two, or open it wide up?
I'd say
This is a
sure.
procedural
And I'd
rather
actually
than-
like to invite employees that are currently employed that did make a sacrifice recently to even come and speak and tell us about what you think about it.
And also, we could certainly put up a place to just email comments, correct?
I don't know how that works.
Well, I'm sure we can have them sent to the committee. Could maybe even set up an email address for the committee. We'll figure it out, but we get offer comment. Do you think we should have 2 sessions, maybe one during the day and one in the evening, or what do you think about that?
I'd say if it's an inconvenience to have employees come during the day, then let's just plan to have it in the evening.
Well, there might be citizens who would want to come that couldn't come during the day as well. A model that I've seen work really well I don't know how many people will come, is to simply take everybody, they sign in, everybody gets 4 minutes, we just hear it out, and it's done, and we go on. It really is a hearing. So no matter what side of the issue they're on, they don't sign up for pros and cons, they just roll. Seems to work pretty well. Okay. Any thoughts as to when? I know people talk about avoiding December because it's holiday times, but if we picked a 2-hour slot in an afternoon and a 2-hour slot in an evening,
The
next couple
25th
weeks?
and 26th.
You think?
No. No,
Folks will have too much to eat, they won't
Yes.
come? What?
no. I mean, I'm open.
Any time that's a bad time? We do have council meetings first 3 Tuesday nights. Other than that, I mean, I don't know people's schedules or any particular.
Something like that. Maybe you could kind of coordinate it where we could end the day with the meeting and then have the second meeting right after that.
Yeah, I
And
like that idea.
then we don't have to come on separate days and separate times. We just come at 3 o'clock and we'll stay till 6 or whatever, or however long we need.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking date-wise, we need
we
time
need
to
a start and
publicize it
finish.
right.
Yeah,
So probably the earliest to be like the second week of December or something, to give people time to digest this and plan to come. And I mean, I know, like, for me, like, seems like my kids get off about the second, maybe 2.5 weeks into December from college, or, so that's when maybe
It's
it
tend to be
gets,
busy at that time.
yeah.
Right?
December 12th, you have JADO.
Oh, we do, that's right.
So
That's on a,
we'll be out.
And then-
is it a Wednesday night or a?
It's a Wednesday night, yeah. Landmarks Commission's on the 13th, not that that would mess anything up in its particular.
We're just asking for comment, though, so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, we probably, with your idea, if we were going to do it the same day, we want to start maybe at 3 and then again at 5:30, let's say, and assume that we would, so that we
Finish
can
the first one.
finish the first one and then start the second one, so that there can be some preliminaries. My neighborhood so far canceling their December meetings, so it opens up some meetings for me.
Yeah, and I have a couple that have done it as well, canceled Monday meetings.
So something like the 13th could work.
Yes, I have that open.
I'm not looking at my calendar. I don't even-
Thursday, the 13th.
Anybody see, on the staff side, see any big issues with that?
like I said, Landmarks Commission meets on the 13th. They're scheduled for first floor of Holiday, so we may need to look at the LEC as a location for the meeting.
Okay.
This wouldn't be as conducive if we're going to have the public come. Probably want to look at the LEC.
Yeah, I'm good for that day too.
So the 13th.
Well, we could see, I mean, landmarks sometimes, maybe they could move upstairs, depends on what they've got on their agenda too.
And sometimes if they don't have anything, they'll cancel the meeting. So we just need to see if they have anything on their agenda.
Do they, Catherine? Oh, you know?
I was going to say, on the 13th, Catherine and I would be involved in a hearing all day, so we would not be available.
Do you think that would be critical if we're just taking input?
We're just taking input. We might be able to get by with the next, I mean, if you're going to have a decision, I definitely want to have them there.
I don't see us making a decision that day, especially if we're going to do 4 hours of hearings, but even if not, I think
Yeah,
people need a little time to process. And let's talk about what kind of research, just so that we have it. We might or might not share it with the public, but what kind of data, it's come up a little bit, would we like to have?
Madam Chair, I heard it mentioned a couple times that we have some positions that have been open like for 2 years. I guess I would want to see what those positions are, and maybe get a little, see if that 3 that you alluded to earlier is a good number, or
Jackie, you guys' conference, what is, I can't remember what that is. Is that the fact find?
It's an arbitration hearing.
You don't know when it would be done? I mean, I would appreciate if you guys would be there.
It's scheduled for the whole day, the 13th and the 14th, so I would expect it to go until 5 o'clock on the 13th, because it's a 2-day hearing and that's the first day.
Yeah, I mean, it would be better if you guys were there.
Well, there's the 19th possibly. Getting close to Christmas.
yeah. I mean, I could do the 19th.
You guys open that day? Just
Or
for
the-
continuity's sake?
The 19th is the day that we have the bulk of the day for the PRC merit review,
Yeah. Maybe we can break that up.
10 to 3.
Yeah, maybe we can break that up. Why don't we look to break that up maybe, so that we're
Okay.
not all day with PRC and see what can work.
We want you to be able to work and talk at the sit and talk anyway. Okay, open positions, other things.
And I'm sorry, I am not doing anything on the 13th, but I won't be in town. I'm leaving the day before.
On the 13th?
Yes.
So that's
So
another
I'm
vote for the
sorry.
19th.
Yes, but I will be here on the 19th. Yes, yeah, I'll be back on the 17th. Yeah, apologize.
That Monday might be okay, but I always just worry about people remembering things that are on Mondays. I might be wrong.
And I won't be back till 10 o'clock that night.
Oh, forget that.
So,
Okay, the
yeah.
19th is, once again. Okay, open positions that have been open long-term, which is good because this is a problem all over the country. It's not just here. And so, certain positions, and actually many positions right now, and as Councilman Padilla said, these things can be a little cyclical. So, do we want to look at the issues? There would be some conversation with us internally, of course, but the issues of some data about whether if you go longer than 6 months, you end up losing them. We've talked a little bit in the course today of the 6 months gives them a chance to figure out whether they really want to move here too, the probation period and so on, whether at 18 months or longer, whether people actually do go ahead and move. At that point, with the discussion we had earlier, people could be valued enough in their team that nobody wants to lose them, even though the code would say they have to move or go, especially in a market like we have. I'm just thinking out loud. There might be some articles or some data about different kinds of terms of, the relocation term.
So what type of term is best?
Well, there's a proposal that if we extended it to 18 or 24 months, maybe that would solve some things.
Right.
Versus
So you want us to look for if there's any data or any best practice related to how long that should be?
experience as to whether that helps anything in plain language.
And perhaps if any people are interviewed between now and then that it's a problem for, maybe they could be asked their opinion as well. Not likely to happen probably, but it's okay, I'll tell her.
Well, why not? It's current anyway. Councilman Cohen?
Yeah, I just had another question. We mentioned our Chattanooga trip a couple times, and did anybody, by chance, did they know that if Chattanooga has a county requirement, county residency requirement also?
I want to check see what their city, we have a list of those from Kansas that we provided. We can highlight that and help you.
There actually were two lists, and they were in the mailing that came from the city manager. And what's interesting is one list, it looks like they pretty much don't have those restrictions, but the other list, over half of them do have a restriction. They're almost all Kansas towns.
Yeah.
So you can look at that sample. I guess staff might want to look and see if there's yet a better sample or something, but we do have two
Well, we
samples
looked at,
already.
similar sized cities in Cedar Rapids, Independence, Lincoln, just to get a cross section of other communities.
Right. One of the charts looks kind of like that. Here's a little bit. The other one looks like that. So you'll find them in what the city manager sent me.
Okay.
I think the city manager also gave us an article that one person had written from a smaller community with just either some sort of professional research on whether these things make a difference.
I think we need to clarify something because we were looking at the bargaining unit contract language.
Okay.
We were talking about extending the time period to allow people to become residents.
And right now, both the police and fire contracts state that it's 6 months after you successfully complete probation, and police has an 18-month probationary period, so 18 plus 6, they're already at 2 years before they have to move.
Well, that's the kind of data we need.
And fire is, the IAFF is a 12-month probationary period plus 6. So they're already at the 18 months
Okay.
mark before they have to establish residency.
Wow.
So in effect, right now, we are treating different employees different with this respect to that, and I realize it's because it's union.
We are, but we have an 18-month probation where other employees only have.
Does that affect that number of 10 to 15 then? Or was that number of how many people we have that are theoretically out of compliance?
It
maybe
varies.
disfigured?
The compliance is based on the length of their probationary period plus 6 months, so that 10 to 15 people encompasses various employee groups and varying probationary periods, but they're all outside of the 6 months after the completion of their probation.
So forgive me with this language, I'm not figuring out how to phrase it any better. So we have some people in that very generous relocation period that are still,
Yes.
you might say, dragging their feet.
Yes, we do.
I guess, of course, with any of these options to wait, it's important that our staff have the backbone to enforce it. So,
And I guess to just further clarify what Mr. Trout said earlier, we have enforced it. The only time that it's not been enforced is since it was brought up as a possible topic of consideration for the governing body. So we have held just recently, but we have always enforced when we become aware of someone not in compliance. As a routine, we track, and when someone is at the end of their probation and have not, we send a courtesy letter and we give them so much time to respond with information that shows they're meeting the requirement. If they're not meeting the requirement, we have then given them 30 days to get into compliance. And so we do have a system in place that has managed the residency requirement until we became aware that it may be an issue for consideration.
Right. Jackie came to me and I told her to hold off on
Okay,
doing that.
just
So
checking.
She's been doing what's required until we address this issue, and I instructed her to hold off until we got a decision as to how we wanted to proceed.
Thank you. I guess I've just asked Jackie, do all employees have a probationary period?
Yes, they do.
And is that the same, outside of union contracts, is it the same for everyone else?
For non-union employees, it is a 6-month probationary period, and then it varies by unions. Police is 18 months, fire is 12 months, water pollution control is 12 months. So it does vary for some of the bargaining units, but the non-bargaining units is a consistent 6 month.
And we talked about police and fire being so long after the probationary period. Is that the same for water and?
6 months after the end of probation is the consistent application for complying with residency.
Okay, thank you.
so does that mean that really everybody already has 18 months right now? It's 6 months after probation, and the city manager can give them another 6 months?
Well, they have to make a special request for the 6-month extension,
I
and
understand.
few employees do that, but they could have up to 18 months if they requested such extension, which does happen on occasion.
Because I think that, I'll speak for myself, that we were under the impression that it was the 6 months from the date of hire, and then up on a request basis, another 6 months.
At the
That's
end
not
of
the
initial
case.
employment probation, they have 6 months to come in.
So it's all, it really starts out with a year for everybody, and then 6 months additional on request.
That's correct.
Right.
Okay.
And I think I've only granted one written exception to that 6 month.
And traditionally, we've had 1 or 2 a year that have requested. I think, as Mr. Trout said, I'm only aware of 1 request that he's granted during his tenure. So there's not a frequent request for extension to comply, but it does happen on occasion.
I guess based on going back to what our problem is, if the reason for having this discussion is how do we hire in challenging environments and how do cities successfully hire full workforces as well as diverse workforces, I'd like to see some, maybe 3 best practices, some articles that you think are good about what people are doing today. I mean, obviously ones that would give us some good ideas or would reinforce some of the great things, for instance, like Chief Cochran is doing. So that, again, if the problem we're trying to solve is filling our positions with good people who are loyal to Topeka and want to be here. I think we could look at those as well. Anything else? Looks we've got some homework that staff will provide for us. We will figure out how to get it online and promote it to public and to staff, and figure out a way to take direct comments as part of that. With that, when we gather this information, we can certainly encourage people to send us stuff, and we can post our stuff as well. And we will expect to reconvene for 2 meetings on the 19th of December, one that starts at 3 o'clock and one that starts at 5:30. And a place to be secured by our Everlot and Liz who will get right on it. Anything else? We're adjourned. Thank you all.
All right, thank you.